Hey there guys, and welcome to another Ask Exterminator video. This is a weekly series that we started a few weeks ago. This is episode number 4, and in this series, you guys ask me questions and I answer them. They can be Factorio related, they can be other game related, they can be completely unrelated to games if you'd like. So if you have questions for me to answer in next week's video, please leave them in the comments of this video, and I will go through and answer those. So today we are answering questions asked in last week's video. And there are some good ones. Again, you guys are asking some fantastic questions. They're just really interesting to me. I think they can be really helpful to some people, and they're just really fun as well. So we're going to start off here. Troopin, who is a fellow YouTuber who has made some pretty awesome content, asks, what in-game challenge would you add to the game as a second objective after launching a rocket? So this is an interesting, question. Uh, the the part about after launching a rocket kind of threw me. Any in-game thing for me personally, I would kind of have as a replacement for the rocket. I don't think the rocket is bad, like in and like by itself. I think it's not enough, but I don't think it's bad. So if we go with the exact question though, as a second objective after launching the rocket, I think it would be neat if there were some sort of, like, you launch the rocket and there's like a little more reasoning behind it. So for example, like maybe you launch it to go, I don't know, to go like seek help or to send back to your home planet or something. And then you, what I think would be cool after that is you like receive word from either some other wandering people, civilization in space, or you launched it to your home planet where you came from, and you hear back from them, and your objective is then to, maybe they say, well, we're gonna, just, the in-game narrative is that maybe they're going to send people to come help, but they actually want to colonize the planet. So then maybe you need to prepare it for colonization in some form. Or if they, respond and say it's going to be a long time before we can get anything out, uh, etc. But here's some like technology we've developed to help you get off the planet. Then, of course, if you launched a rocket, I don't know why you couldn't just get off the planet yourself, but then maybe you have to build something in addition to, like, a much bigger rocket, much bigger, beefier rocket to actually get you back home, or maybe just a rocket to launch into space, to build some sort of space station, which the devs kind of were going towards for a while with the space platform. But build some sort of space station, which on that you then build a bigger rocket. Like maybe you needed to build a rocket to get into space. First off, just because like the size of the rocket you would need to get home is so big it couldn't make it through the atmosphere or something. I don't know. Something like that. Just some thoughts off the top of my head. I think it would be really cool, something like that. It's kind of a long-winded answer, but I think that's my thoughts. I'd be interested in your guys' thoughts as well. Killer B has a pretty long section of question here. The question itself is pretty simple, and then they go into a lot of detail. So I'm not necessarily going to read all the detail because mostly just information behind like their own setups, but they ask, could you do a tutorial video on how to work out oil setups, particularly where recipe changing mods are involved, so that the standard ratios and techniques won't work? I'm not a new player, I've logged 1100 hours, but I still always struggle with getting oil to work well. So it says they've managed to get setups that mostly work in previous bases, but never in an elegant way, lots of buffering in circuits, and they would sometimes get stalled even then. And I've had to manually empty a tank or reset combinator or something. So they say their current map has several mods which change oil processing in more significant ways than I've done before, and I kind of get stalled during the basics of advanced oil refining transition because of it. So this is a hard question to really, like, I can do a tutorial. I think my oil tutorial, like the one or two I have, is fairly outdated. Not that the recipes changed a ton, but some of the ratios did. So I could make a new oil tutorial for vanilla. But I don't think, unfortunately, I don't think it's really I don't think it's really reasonable, or I shouldn't say reasonable, but I don't think it really makes sense for me to make a video to uh, give a tutorial on like recipe changing mods for oil, because there's a lot of mods that change oil recipes. So I'd basically have to do a video on every single one, which would require me learning like quite extensively the mod, because it's more than just oil a lot of times. So I would have to like learn every single thing it changes about oil, and then I'd have to figure out the ratios for it, and then I'd need to like learn more about the mod to realize like what you even need like a lot of those oil products for. Like that's a ton, like massive amount of work for all the mods that change oil. So I can't really do it specifically for mod changing recipes for oil. Is it just general overarching piece of advice? I would say to just kind of approach it as you would approach vanilla. Like even if it changes the recipe, unless it's a very poorly balanced mod, there should be some sort of ratio, even if it's not perfect. There should be some sort of fairly reasonable ratio for stuff, which you can figure out, by looking at the recipe. I'm sure you know this with the amount of hours you've played. And even if it's more complicated, just try to take things one step at a time, and just like that's really the best advice I can give. It's really hard to give advice on things that I have no knowledge of in terms of like how a mod is changing an oil recipe, or anything like that. But I certainly could do a new tutorial for vanilla oil, at least, and then just oil stuff in general, and maybe that would be helpful. Human person asks, how to combat perfectionism? I personally find it very hard to stop optimizing already good designs and actually getting stuff done. This is an excellent question, and I don't have a foolproof, just a perfect answer for you. I would almost answer your question with another question, which is, do you need to combat it? Like, now, if it's actually really hindering you in like stopping you from having fun in the game, then you maybe do need to combat it, and I'll get into that in a second. But the thing with Factorio is like Factorio is a game that can very much appeal and actually, have benefits gained from perfectionism. And if that's what you enjoy, I don't think you need to change it. Like if you just want to optimize already good design, like just optimize designs to the upteenth degree, just optimize, whether it be visually or performance or production or all three. If that's like what you're into, I personally don't think you need to change it. Like, sure, you may not be getting much done, but like you don't have to like progress a certain amount in the game necessarily. Like there's entire playthroughs where you literally just stay, like some people just do crazy playthroughs where they just like never get past like blue science, or like some people just spend like there's people who watch my streams and are in my community who I talk to, so I know this. They just spend like hundreds of hours literally in creative mode just making setups, like that they don't even play the game through the tech tree and like progression. So unless it's like actually stopping you from having fun, I think just continue. I mean, it doesn't really help your question, but I really don't see a reason to change if that's what you're into. Now, if it is causing an issue, like it is actually frustrating you, honestly, I would say like, I mean, it's just so hard. It's just so hard to give a good way to stop it, because I was gonna say just try to move on to the next thing. But obviously, if you're so focused on optimizing something you've already built, that's going to be really hard to do. That it's a really hard question to answer. I mean, personally, I don't really suffer from that, so it's hard to give advice on it. Like, I optimize to some degree, but for me personally, I guess I can just share my own experience. Is I will build a design and I'll optimize it a bit, and then usually I just get, I'm kind of just get this urge where I'm just like, okay, I really need to I need to be moving on in the game. Like there's some stuff I want like later in the tech tree or some items I want. Um, I'll just go build those and I can come back to optimizing this. And sometimes I do, and sometimes I just never come back to it. But really, I think that like I feel like the game itself in a way almost pushes you to move forward because, typically there's going to be like items and text later on you want that you basically have to go build the next thing for, unless you're just sitting in creative mode and just building designs, in which case I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with just having extreme perfectionism. So hopefully that helps. I know it wasn't just like a super concrete answer, but that, it's hard to give advice on something that I don't personally experience. And also just, I don't think it's like I said, if it's not causing you frustration or like it's not taking the fun away, if that's what you're into for the game, I say just don't even bother trying to change it. Like that's a very viable way to have your experience in Factorio, in my opinion. Let's see. That's not a question. Some board game suggestions, which sounds pretty fun. Um, Let me see here. So here's a question from uh, Ophice, I think. Ophice. Good day, Xterm. Love your content. Well, thank you. I'm starting to play Factorio when I saw your Sending Supporters to Space playthrough, which I've mentioned multiple times now. I tried to make something comparable to it, only I didn't make it even close to 1K science per minute base. Do you have any tips or tricks for it? And do you have any tips for a fellow YouTuber to make content more interesting to see? I'm not a great editor. I'm trying also Twitch. I'll upload the stream on YouTube. Do you have any tips for me? Okay, well, for the first half of your question, if I have any tips or tricks for building like a Megabase, it's really hard. Like, I'm not gonna lie, building a Megabase, especially even just getting past the 1K science per minute threshold, is pretty hard, in all honesty. Once you do get past the 1K science per minute threshold, even though the scale becomes bigger, I think it almost becomes easier in some ways than it like to scale up past that than it was actually getting to that point. Because once you have that, you know all the numbers for an even amount of like if you're making 1K science per minute and like you already have all the builds, all the calculations theoretically, unless you just somehow forgot all of them. I would recommend either use a calculator like an online source like Kirk McDonald or something, or Factorial Calculator or something like that. So you have those numbers, or write them down, or you can just look at your production, I suppose. But you have those. So then it's just in this. I'm making this sound simple and easy, but at its core, it is simple to just then multiply that to whatever degree that you want. If you want 2K, you just take what you've already built at 1K and just double it. And again, I'm making that sound super simple. Like, obviously, that's a lot of effort and, like, brings in other logistical issues, like with trains. But I think getting to 1K is the hardest, and tips and tricks for actually getting there. I guess kind of just do what I just mentioned, but from a smaller scale. So maybe just try to build, like, a 200 science per minute base or a 500 science per minute base, and, like, get that working. Like, it's gonna take steps. Like, if you've never built a mega base and you've always just built, like, say 100 science per minute bases or less, you're gonna have a really hard time, as it seems you did, going to a over 1,000 science pack per minute base, much less far past that. So I almost say, even though it's going to take time and a lot of effort, I would say build up to it. That's actually my best advice. So maybe do a 200 science per minute base, or if you've already done that, maybe do a 500 science per minute base, and like get that working, and understand like the issues that come up by doing that, and all that, and then maybe the next playthrough you do 800 science per minute, or if you're just feeling confident from 500, maybe just then go to 1,000, and it's just double what you've done before. I would say scale up. Like, when I built my sending support as a space base, which was 4,000 science per minute, that was not my first mega base. That was my first mega base, like, alone mostly. But I had participated in multiple other mega bases, like probably 4 or 5 at least megabases with like kernel will and stuff. I had actually played with them through most of it, helped build them, so I had a very good understanding for the most part of everything that was required for it. I certainly was not just going from like a sub 1K science per minute base all the way up to doing 4,000 science a minute, because that's insane. Like, I don't think I would have been able to do it. In terms of a fellow YouTuber to make content more interesting to see, that's really hard. Like, I'm gonna be. This is advice for anybody. It's really hard. Like, I'm gonna be honest. Like, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not saying you can't do it, but right now in this day and age, there is, even with Factorio, which is a fairly niche game, there's a lot of competition in so many different styles of people doing things. But with that, I think having different styles of people doing things is actually a very good thing. I was actually just talking today on my stream about it, about tutorials. Like, there are multiple people, very well-known YouTubers, myself, Neilhouse, Catherine of Sky, several others, who have done tutorials all on the same subject or very similar subject. And each of us has a different way of representing things, and each of us forgets a little something that the other ones pick up, or add something extra that the other ones don't. And I think that is really good, because some people learn better having something presented one way than a different way, and stuff like that. So I don't think it's bad to do something that someone else has already done, as long as you don't just like literally 100% flat out copy it. But yeah, so my advice, I guess, would just be, I guess, just try to, like, whatever content you're making, I would assume Factorio, and in whatever type of Factorio content you're making, I would say just like try to present your content and your information in the best, like, most understandable way possible, even if it's not tutorials, even if it's just playthroughs. Like, try to just really present your content the best way you can. It, like, and then just honestly, I would say just be yourself. Like, there's a lot of YouTubers who like put on these personas, and if that's your thing, do that. If that's like not natural to you, then do not try that. Like, definitely just be yourself. Like, that's what that I mean, I guess that's like how I've succeeded, is I put on zero personas. This like, this is literally how I talk to my friends. This is how I talk to my girlfriend. This is how I talk to my parents. Like, I am putting on no persona in any of my content. I and like the same I think would go for you, if unless you're just a natural at like just putting on a show and having a different persona than the way you normally act. And if that's your thing, then go for it, and maybe that's working better than you like maybe normal you is just really boring, but you're really good at like acting, just like acting, a really goofy way, or something like that. It's really hard. Like, I can't just give straight up advice necessarily. I hope that helps. But yeah, so I think that was enough time spent there. Let me see here. Here's another question from Chaos. Do you ever get feelings of being overwhelmed by what you need to do at certain points in the game? I deal with it a lot, and it kills my motivation to keep playing at times. I'm curious if there's a good way to help overcome that. I do. It's not just you. I have thousands of hours, like 6,000+ hours in the game, and I still get overwhelmed by stuff. Particularly things like, okay, I should rephrase that. At this point in vanilla, I don't get overwhelmed. I get annoyed, which is just like, for me personally, that's just like one step below overwhelmed. So I mean, it's a similar feeling. It's a similar feeling, just not quite as daunting, by things like blue science and oil. Like, every time I have to do oil, I don't like doing oil. I don't like doing oil. um, and that may be one for you. That's a one for a lot of people, especially. And then like one thing that is overwhelming to me is like scaling up things. Like if I've built a base and for whatever reason, whether it's a self-imposed goal or a goal that my Twitch chat is influencing or a goal of a mod, if I then scale up a base I've already built to do more, that's really overwhelming to me. Like I would say that's extremely overwhelming to me. Um, and it does kill motivation. Like there are times where I'm just like, I mean, there are times where I've not altogether like lost motivation, but there's times where I've been streaming and I've just been like, okay, I'm just gonna go eat dinner. Like, I'm done. I just lost motivation. I'm like, okay, this is enough. I don't want to tackle this right now. And maybe within that is part of an answer for you. And you're starting to feel really overwhelmed. Maybe you just take a break. Now, if it's such a large encompassing feeling where it's just like the second you log back on, you're just instantly overwhelmed again, then that's a problem. But I do find that if I'm playing for a while and then I like hit some point in the game or something I need to do that I become really annoyed with or overwhelmed, sometimes it really does help for me to just call it a day or call it a session and then just come back and start fresh. And the first thing I need to do is whatever was annoying me last time, and while it's not the best feeling, I get it done, and then I can move on to things that aren't as overwhelming. Um, in terms of just like overall overcoming it, this is not probably the answer you're looking for. Well, I have two answers for you. It's kind of a two-part answer. The first part is just push through it. And that's probably not the answer you want. But sometimes that's what I have to do. If there's a thing that I don't want to do and is overwhelming to me in the game or even in real life, I literally just make myself do it. And while that sounds very unfun, I mean, it's a game. Like, if you're, like, literally not having fun, then, I mean, maybe you shouldn't be playing the game. At least in that stage. But then the second part of that answer is, like, I'm never not having fun at all in the game. Like, sure, I get annoyed or overwhelmed, but, like, I'm still playing the game. Like, I'm still having a good time. It's just kind of a bit much sometimes. But the second part of that answer is what really does help me is taking things one step at a time. I've said this before. I say it all the time, more and more now, because there's, new people joining and they have a lot of questions like this. And, like, so for example, if you need to build, like, I made a tutorial on this, like, shortly after 1.0 came out. Actually, before 1.0, I think. If you need to do blue science, let's just hypothetically say that you get overwhelmed and stuck at blue science. It can be really overwhelming and make you lose motivation if you just look at the whole thing and you're just like, oh my god, I gotta make electric engines, and then I gotta do oil to do sulfur, and then I gotta do red circuits, and I gotta do plastic to do red circuits, and it's like, that's really overwhelming. But if you literally just eliminate everything else in that process except one thing, and usually, personally, I like to start with the easiest thing, engines. So I will just, like, there are no red circuits in this recipe. There are no, like, there's no sulfur. Okay, I'm just going to build engines. I know I need engines for this. I'm going to figure out how many I need, and I'm going to build engines. And that's it. Engines are really simple. And I do that. And then, usually after I do that, I actually gain motivation because I'm like, oh, dang, I already did this one thing. It's pretty easy. There's only two things left now, in this. And I look, I'm like, okay, well, let's just do sulfur. Great, I got to do oil, but sulfur's not that bad. And I don't even worry about plastic. I don't worry about red circuits. And I just set up some oil. Again, that process is fairly lengthy and annoying in of itself. But then sulfur is pretty straightforward. And I get sulfur, I'm like, well, I'm 2/3 of the way done now. One more thing, and I have blue science done. And then I move on to it. So just taking things one step at a time and like trying to just eliminate, like temporarily eliminate from your like view of what else, everything else involves, I find really, really helpful. So hopefully that helps you. Another question. Unceasing Top asks, how do you feel with the future of Factorio? With the release of 1.0, would you prefer DLC or a sequel to be announced? Um, I think the future for Factorio is... I think it's... this is probably a really cheesy way to answer, but I think the future of Factorio is bright with a chance of cloudiness and storms. I'm presenting that in a very corny forecast way, and the reason I say this is because I think the future for Factorio can be very bright. I mean it's obviously a fantastic game. I think it's one of the best dev teams out there, like in the entire gaming industry. That like I'm dead serious. Like I think that Factorio devs are one of the best game devs out in the entire gaming industry. Um, and they do an excellent job. I mean, the game is insanely well rated. Second highest rated game on Steam, 1.0 release. It's bringing in a lot of new people. And here's the thing. I think if the devs just they release 1.1 and maybe even 1.2 after that, just to get all the bugs fixed, add any little tweaks and balancing and quality of life they wanted that didn't get in 1.0. If they just stopped at that point, if they were just like, okay, if they just did nothing else ever from that point forward to the game, I think the game itself would be excellent and obviously considered finished. However, I don't see it really. I see it dying down, unfortunately, and that's why I added the chance of cloudy with storms, because if nothing else is done past that, I think the people who are really into Factorio, like me and the many other people who already have thousands of hours, we could just keep playing, and we probably will. And it will draw in some new people, will trickle in, but Factorio is a game where it's just it's such a niche game that without continued added content, I feel like it will just kind of hit a limit of the amount of players that are interested in it just because it's a niche game. However, and this kind of goes into your second part of your question, if they do stuff after that, I think it has an extremely bright future. The game's already insanely good. It's already basically been more finished for the last 2 years than most AAA other indie games. So if they get stuff done with this that they want to, personally, I would prefer a DLC to a sequel. And I think with a decent, it's not, obviously they would release a decent DLC. It's the Factorio devs. So with a good DLC, I think the game could just continue to flourish so well. There's been a huge influx of players of 1.0. I think a DLC would bring even more people in. I personally, as a longtime player, would absolutely love a DLC. And I don't want to go too far into this because there's still more questions. But basically, I prefer a DLC or a sequel. One, because a DLC would be a lot quicker. They spent 9 years making Factorio. I don't really want to wait another 6 years for a sequel. That sounds rude, but I think it's reasonable to assume it would take them a very long time to do a sequel, even if they already have the Factorio engine done and all that, so it'd be faster, but still. A DLC, I think, because here's the thing. I think Factorio still lacks stuff. It's a finished game, but I think there's a lot that could be added to the current Factorio we know now, that would be DLC worthy, some sort of extended late game, some sort of extended enemies and combat and loot to do with the enemies or something, some sort of extended tech, etc., etc. I think it could honestly have, it depends how big they were, but I think it could have 1 to 3 DLCs is what I'm thinking. Now, if it's, they could just stuff a ton of stuff into one and then it would probably just have one. But I can easily see 3 different things a DLC, 3 different DLCs could cover. And that's what I would prefer, because it'd be quicker. It'd be, I think, more coherent with what we have. I don't really see, yeah, actually, the game ends in kind of a weird scenario, so I suppose a sequel kind of would be appropriate, but I still think a DLC would be better. So yeah, that's my answer. From Windows Agent, from where did you come with your name? Is it a reference to Skynet on the scenes of Terminator movies when it shows in the manufacturing facility? So no, actually, uh, believe it or not, it's actually, I mean, it's kind of a reference to Terminator, but not actually. Like, it wasn't like I watched the Terminator movie and he was just like, okay, I'm going to use this name. I've actually told the story before, but only like in like one or two scenarios. So I'm not surprised that you don't know. It's actually it's one of my favorite stories because, believe it or not, my name is actually something that kind of came about from a name that like something a friend said to me. So a long time ago, back when I started playing games, the first like real, I say real, like the first like serious game I was allowed to play, also the first, which is also the first M-rated game I was allowed to play, was Halo Combat Evolved. Um, Halo 1 on PC. My dad and I wanted to play it. We finally convinced my mom that it was okay to play it, even though it was rated M, because I was not 17 at the time. And I played it. I loved it, and I got really good at it. Like, uh, I'm not gonna try to. I mean, I'm not gonna try to be humble. I was really good at it, and I used to play with my friends. And my best friend, we used to play a lot together. And I would play. I was really good, and he was just like, one day he was just like, dude, you're just like, dominating these lobbies. You're doing so good. You're just exterminating everybody. And he was like, and I at the time and still I'm like really bad at coming up with names. I'm very bad with names. And he was like, at the time I had some weird, really stupid name, and he was like, "You're just exterminating people. Why don't you make that your name?" And that's how the name was born. And I really liked it. I thought it fit, and that's what I've run with from this point on. So, I mean, kind of exterminating, but that's where it came from. It's not like a direct reference from Terminator, but it does kind of tie in, I suppose. I guess like I was in Halo what the Terminator was in Terminator. Like, I guess, I don't know. So that's the answer to the question. Fred G asks, "Do you still have any images of your early factories? How bad of a spaghetti mess were they?" I have saves of my earlier factories, and actually second, um, the second level patron on my Patreon, they get access to it. I'm thinking of creating YouTube memberships, and I think one of the lower levels of them would get access to my saves as well. So I actually have the save of my very first factory, and they were real bad. It was it was really bad. They were a huge spaghetti mess. They were insanely inefficient. It was bad. It was really bad. So they were pretty bad. I actually have multiple questions. The second one is, are you happy with the way Spidertron has been implemented? What changes would you make to it if you could? I'm happy with Spidertron. I love the fact they added it. There are some things with it I'm not particularly happy with, which leads into the second part of your question. One, I would make you be able to set waypoints for it. I really hope they do that. I hope they allow you to control multiple Spidertrons at once with one remote, rather than having like a bajillion remotes. There are mods for these things, but I really do think they should be vanilla. I think it needs a little bit of work with just how it operates. Like, I was streaming today and saw multiple times, especially with me riding in the Spidertron, where it would just like really glitch out. It like the legs would like lag way behind it for a second, and it would like go into slow mo, and then the legs would like bounce back to it, which could have just been lag, but I've seen other instances of that as well. So I think it just needs a little work, a little, love and care, and then just some quality of life stuff, like I mentioned. Is there a reason you don't use the keyboard shortcuts for the hotbar? I don't have a good reason. It drives people crazy that I don't do it. I'm just not. I just don't. I don't know. I do sometimes. I use Q a lot, which I think is almost as good um, in most situations. I can consider you as the other question is I consider you as the Factorio YouTuber. Well, thank you. Do you? And do you consider someone else more iconic? Uh, no, I don't consider myself the Factorio YouTuber. I used to. If I'm being completely honest, I think Neolaus is ahead of me in that regard. As I would say, Catherine of Sky is questionable. I have now before anyone gets upset, I'm not criticizing KOS whatsoever. We've done playthroughs together. She's awesome. She does awesome content. What I wanted to follow that up with before I give that disclaimer is there was a time where I think she definitely was more iconic than me. However, for quite some time, she didn't really do much Factorial content at all. Now I know she's doing quite a bit once now that 1.0 is released, so she's definitely, coming back up there. But I feel like she got a little behind in the Factorio scene. She was doing a lot of other variety content and stuff. So that's the only reason. But Neolaus is killing it, man. Like, I'm not gonna shit like Neolaus is doing real good. So I honestly I consider him the Factorio YouTuber. I would consider myself second right now, honestly. KOS maybe slightly behind just because there was time where she just wasn't really doing Factorio much at all, so kind of lost a little bit of that audience maybe. Definitely picking back up. I don't like. I think there's room for more than one big Factorio YouTuber, honestly. And the last question is a bit odd. They say, "Who is your girlfriend? Would she consider coming on camera?" Well, who is she? I mean that's like an impossible thing to answer. I mean she's a girl I met, and then would she consider coming on camera? And we've talked about it. She's game for it. It's hard for scheduling because currently she works nights and I obviously don't. So anytime I'm streaming, she's actually asleep. And weekends are usually pretty busy. It's kind of just and finding something that's just appropriate to like be on camera for. Like, I mean, I guess I could just play Factorio and have her on camera. But we wanted to do something special for it. So we've been considering it'll happen eventually, I'm sure. I just don't really know when. Chad asks, we're almost done here, guys. I think this is actually the last question. Chad asks, what do you think Ubi's next game will be like RTS, FPS, visual novel? Well, first off, I hope they make a Factorio DLC before they do any other game. Second, I'm going to say, well, what do I think it will be? I think it would be some sort of like if I just had to just my gut feeling, I feel like honestly, I feel like it would be some sort of like I have two answers for that. I think it would be either some sort of like steampunky, like Factorio, like graphical style, uh, like ARPG, which I would love, or, and there's just like random gut feelings, I think it would be some sort of other type of like management game, but different. There's different types of management games. Like, Dwarf Fortress is different than Factorio, then is different than Oxygen Not Included, then is different than the other shoot, what's it called? I forget the other really popular one, but they're all management games. So I feel like maybe some sort of other type of management thing. However, I know you didn't ask this, but what I hope it is an RTS. I would absolutely love an RTS from the Factorio devs. Like, I cannot stress enough. Like, I don't know that it would be as popular as what I'm gonna compare to, but I think that an RTS from the Factorio devs would be on par with the likes of StarCraft. Like, the devs are so good. They are so good at just like quality of life things and polishing and balancing for the most part, that and like listening to the community. I think the Factorio devs could make a truly amazing, like very long-standing, iconic RTS, and I would absolutely love that. I'm a huge fan of RTSs, but I'm very picky with what I like. Warcraft is up there for me. Warcraft 3. I think my all-time favorite RTS is Rise of Nations, and StarCraft is up there. Um, I think that would be my hope. In terms of what I think, I don't know if they would. I would absolutely love that. Like, I cannot stress enough how excited I would throw money at them, hand over fist, if they made an RTS, because I truly think that they can make one of the best RTSs of all time. Like, definitely on StarCraft level. Like StarCraft, I think is StarCraft Command and Conquer. Um, I think they could be on par with that for sure. Definitely not an FPS, by the way. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it, guys. This is a very long one, but I went kind of overboard on some of the answers, but I think that's gonna do it. Leave your questions for me to answer next week in the comments of this video, and thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, feel free to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe to keep up with all the content I'm releasing. And until next time, I look forward to seeing you all, and do take care.